Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Daf Yomi. We are starting about 15 lines or so from the bottom of Yud Zayin and Bezin in the middle of the thick lines, about 8 lines into the thick lines at the 2 dots. Today we're going to be discussing some sugyas about tsuroros. As we know, there's a din of tsuroros where a person has an animal. The animal steps on a rock. The rock kicks up and then damages something. We learned yesterday at the conclusion of yesterday's Gemara that Chatzi Nezek Tsuroros is a halacha l'mosh misinai. It's not a regular drasha. It's not a pasuk in Chumash. You can't find it in the psukim if you look. It is a halacha l'mosh misinai, and we'll get back to that shortly. But first, we have to navigate a couple of other small sugyas. Halacha l'mosh misinai. You can't use regular. Your question is a fine question when it's not halacha l'mosh misinai, but it's not a good. Yeah, we don't apply those kinds of principles to halacha l'mosh misinai. They're not logical in that classical kind of way. So let's get started. 15 lines from the bottom. Zayin and Beis. The Gemara says, "Omar Rava, kol shebezav tamei." Listen to this. Anything that is with a zav is going to be tamei. Namely, let's say that a zav or a zava sits on a mattress, the mattress becomes tamei. It's called tumas medris. So in the same way, this is an odd link, but in the same way that a zav sits on a mattress and makes it tamei, b'nezikin, if the same exact damage was done, if I sit on a board and it breaks, mishalem nezek shalem. Gemara's comparison doesn't bother, the Gemara says, to explain why we're linking up zav to the world of nezikin. There is something to be learned from it, of course, as we'll soon see, but it's not clear from the outset. And kol shebezav tahor, anything that by a zav would be tahor, and this the Rishonim explain as an example of someone who throws something. Take a look at Rashi, 2 Rashis in a row. 25 lines from the bottom, shebezav tamei, mashma nagia mamish, you're actually touching the mattress, whatever it may be, shebezav tar, kigon shezorak chayfetz al adam have tahor. If a zav or a zava throws something and it lands on another person, the din is that they're tahor. So the Gemara says over here, kol shebezav tahor, if I were to throw something to a zav, if the zav would throw something to a person who's pure, they'd be tahor. B'nezikin, if damage is caused through throwing, then mishalem chatzi nezek. So Rava gives shiur in Bavel, and everyone's like, what just happened? Why did we just mix 2 very complicated sugyas with one another? Each of them are hard. We don't need to put them together. So someone raised their hand and said, Rava tzroros asalash minan. You're coming to teach me your chiddush is the case of kol shebezav tahor, that by a zav, if you throw something, you're not going to be tahor. So too, if you throw something, it's chatzi nezek. We know that already. That's chatzi nezek tsuroros. So what are you coming to teach me? It says the Gemara, look, that's not what Rava is coming to teach us. Rava, agala mosheches bekaron kamash malan. Rava is coming to teach us of a case of an agala that's being pulled by an animal. So you have a chariot, it's being pulled by an animal, and the Gemara over here wants to teach us that this is the case. What does this mean? Well, we'll see in a minute in the Raya. Tanya Kavase the Rava, there's a brisa that supports the sheet of Rava. Behema mu'edes l'shaber b'derech hilucha. This we've seen numerous times already, that a behema is mu'ad, meaning there's no time that we treat him as docile. He's always like this. That while an animal is walking, b'derech hilucha, it can break things. Ketzad, what's an example of this? Behema shenichnesa l'chatzer hanizak. Let's say that my behema walks into your private property, v'hizika, and my animal damages your property, begufa, either with its body, derech hilucha, just by walking, uvesara derech hilucha, or with the hair of my animal in your yard, be'ukaf she'aleha, or because of the saddle, uveshalev shela, or packages that are on the animal, ubeprumbia shebefiha, or that bar that's in its mouth that's used as part of the rein, uvezug shebetzavara, any adornments that are on it, a bell, whatever the case may be, or vechamor b'masao, if my donkey's walking in your property laden with packages, and then this case as well, ve'egla mosheches bekeren. All of these cases are mishalem nezek shalem. That was the chiddush of Rava. The chiddush of Rava was to say that just like if you're just sitting inside the thing and the animal's pulling you, but if the animal's pulling you and that which it's pulling causes damages, that's still nezek shalim. That's why Rava went to the world of Zav. He went there because simply sitting causes a problem. And if you're pulling this chariot, so the cow is pulling a chariot, the chariot is going over someone's property, that's Nezek Shalim, it's considered muad, out of the gates. So therefore Rava really didn't need to go to the world of Zav. I guess he could have just said what he wanted to say, but he did make some type of equivalence between the two worlds. And that brings us to the Tanu Rabbanan, about 8 or 9 lines from the bottom of the page. Tanu Rabbanan, Tarnagolim, you got chickens. They're poking with their beaks at a rope. The rope is holding up a bucket. And because of all of its poking of the rope, so obviously, of course, the story is going to go this way. This is like Road Runner, Amol, Marmakom. So the Gemara says, V'nishbar hadli, that the pitcher falls and breaks. What's the din? Mishalmen nezek shalim. What does that teach us? That it's urche. That's a normal thing for a chicken to do. Boy Rava. Rava asks on this and says, Darsa al kli v'lo shivarto. Let's say that an animal jumps on the kli and doesn't break it. And v'niskalgel l'makom acher v'nishbar. And then when he jumps on this kli, he hits it in just the right spot that it doesn't break, but fires off into the next yard and breaks something. Mahu. Do we say basar me'ikara azlin, and we follow the initial action v'gufehu, and the initial action is not even tzroros, it's just gufe, it's exactly what he did. Odilma basar tvarmana azlinon v'tzroros ninu. Do we call it regular nezek, which is, he'd be muad for that, because we know that to walk, for an animal to walk, a behemoth that's holeches is going to be nezek shalim? Or do we say no, that if you step on it and it kicks up and then causes damage or breaks like that, what is that breakage like? Is that breakage nezek shalim, it's orche, or no, is it chatzi nezek tzroros? Says the Gemara, tifshot leimi de Rabba. We actually could infer an answer from a case of Rabba. To Amar Rabba, Rabba taught us the following. Zarak kli me rosh hagag. Let's say that I am standing on the roof and I take a pitcher and I throw it off the roof. And some guy is standing on the ground. He watches you doing this. He's like, perfect batting practice. He takes his bat. As the pitcher is falling, he times his swing perfectly, and he shatters the pitcher into 1,000 pieces. Who's held accountable? Is it the guy who dropped the pitcher from the top, or the guy who actively broke the pitcher by swinging a bat at the pitcher before it hit the ground? On the one hand, it was gufe, I let it go. Inevitably, it will break. At the same time, Lamaisa, I'm not the one who broke it. The guy standing at the bottom broke it. This was Rabba's question. So the Gemara says, someone has to be chayiv. Someone has to pay. But it's not two people. It's not two people who broke it. One person broke it. I could argue that either person broke it. It could be that the second I go like this, it's halachically broken, right? Because of gravity. It also could be that, no, we view every moment in time separately, 60 frames per second. In the first 59 frames, nothing happened. In the 60th frame, you see a bat come across and shatter it into pieces.
Yeah, but then it's almost like a shutfus.
The Gemara doesn't even entertain shutfus, as we'll see in a moment. The Gemara doesn't even entertain that. It's not viewed as a shutfus. Rabba's question wants to know, who do we follow? Do we follow the person who's klime rosh hagag, or do we follow ba'achar v'shavra b'makel? So halacha l'maisa, the person who swings the bat is pater. Why? Look at this line. De'amrina le mana tvira tavar. You broke a broken kli. Namely, the second I let go at the top, halachically, that kli is in shattered pieces. Done. So l'maisa, what do we say? It's basar gufe azlina. So what was our question before? We said if an animal tramples on something and that kli doesn't break, but it kicks out and then breaks something else, we were asking, is that tzroros or gufe? We can infer from Rabbah that it's gufe, no different than when the guy drops the kli from the top. It's instantly considered shattered, even if someone else actually does the shattering, because obviously gravity works. So the second you let go, let's make the case more severe. If a person is thrown off of a building, but somebody shoots him on the way down, who's guilty? This Gemara would say the guy threw him off the building. Mana tvira tavar. You shot someone who was dead. Again, you have to know he's going to die. But yeah, lemaisa, whatever. I'm creating a scenario. pretty bad scenario to create, but it's nevertheless, halachically, it would be equivalent to this particular case. So therefore, perhaps we have an answer to our question. The Gemara says, Le Rabba, Pshitale. Okay, Rabba agreed to that case that Mana Tvira Tavar, that the guy who swung at the pitcher on the way down, he was late to the party. That thing was halachically broken the second it was let go. But that's only a pashut according to Rabba. But Rava mibayale, it's still a question according to him. So we still need to find an answer to our question. If an animal tramples on a kli and it doesn't break and it kicks out and then it causes damage, is it chatzi nezik tzroros or is it nezik shalim? So a couple of answers to try and figure out Rava. Toshma. We've seen this Gemara before. Hidus eno muad. A dancing chicken is not considered muad. What that means is the behaviors that happen while the chicken's dancing are treated as tam, as docile. That means chatzi nezek, right? Then the Gemara says, no, muad. Some say that's not true, that the dancing chickens don't they're just crazy animals. They just run around, they dance, they move around, and therefore they are muad. L'may nafkamina, nezek shalim. So if you say the dancing chicken is is a tam, then it's chatzi nezek. If it's a muad, then it's nezek shalim. Says the Gemara, hidu sal kadaitach. Is there really a havamina that a dancing chicken is not going to be considered muad? What? There's like a dancing mode and a non-dancing mode to chickens? They don't know what they're doing. So they run around and they break things, or they don't. But it's for sure natural to them. It's not like they have different modes. Elalav, you're right. We're not talking about hidus by itself. We're not talking about a chicken dancing, because whatever that chicken does will most definitely be considered muad, and the damages would be nezek shalim on the owner. Rather, what are we talking about? Elalav, hidus, the chicken's dancing, vihitis. And in the dancing, there's hataza, there's tzroros, there's a kickoff of what he does. So this chicken's, let's pick an ostrich because of his weight. The ostrich is running and he kicks on something and it doesn't break and it shoots off. It's hitis, it's hidus v'hitis. Ubehaka miflagi. Here, perhaps maybe Rava can use this as a template to answer our question about a larger animal doing this. Maybe we would say, Demar savar basar mei kara azlina. We follow the initial move that the animal made. Umar savar basar tavar mona azlina. No, we follow where and when the kli actually breaks. So perhaps we can use this as a template for Rava to answer his question. The Gemara says, lo, you cannot do that. Turning to the top of Yud Ches Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, why not? Because behitis tzroros. The Gemara says we are only talking about hitis tzroros. It's not a regular case of muad, and it's simply all we're talking about is tzroros and stam. We have a machlokas between Sumchus, who says that tzroros is going to be nezek shalem, and the Tanakama, who says that tzroros is going to be chatzi nezek. So that didn't work for Rava. Let's try answer number 2 for Rava. Tashma Yud Ches Amud Aleph, second line. Tarnagol and Chayim Mechatatin Bechevel. We saw this case earlier in regards to Rava. This was the presenting case of Rava and Rabba. And now the Gemara requotes this, and we're going to analyze it more carefully. You have a chicken who's pecking away at a rope. It's Bechevel Dli, which is holding up a pitcher. Benifsa Kachevel Benishbar Hadli. And the rope breaks after the beak, after the chicken pokes at the rope one time too many. And then Benishbar Hadli, the pitcher falls and breaks. The halacha is Mishalman Nezek Shalim. So says the Gemara, Shma Mina, what could Rava infer from here? That Basar Mei Kara Azlina. If you're saying Nezek Shalim, that means you're blaming the chicken. If you're blaming the chicken, that means he's Muad, and that means it's Nezek Shalim, which means it's Basar Mei Kara. We're following those initial actions. So says the Gemara, no, not true. Tirgama Achevel. That when we say that there was damage, perhaps what we're talking about in regards to the chicken is only in regards to the chevel that he's chayav nezek shalim, because that's what the beak poked. He never touched the pitcher. The pitcher was at the bottom of the well. He was poking at the rope, and then with the weight of it, it fell 10 feet, but he never did. So the Gemara says maybe the nezek shalim is only on the rope and not on the pitcher. Says the Gemara, that can't be, because it's not normal. It would be a weird way for a chicken to behave, to take its beak, for a bird to behave, to poke, unless it's a woodpecker. I don't know that they had those in the times of the Gemara, but we know that from our cult. My in-laws' house had one that you made huge holes in the side of their wood house, massive holes. That's normal for them. The average bird doesn't do that, and this bird was poking a rope. So says the Gemara, you can't tell me that something is nezek shalem unless it's urche, unless it's normal. But if it's mishuna, if it's a not normal behavior, by definition, it's chatzi nezek. So says the Gemara, how can you say that the bird pecking at the rope is normal? V'hachevel mishunahu, that's not a normal behavior. It should have been nezek shalem. So says the Gemara, it should have been chatzi nezek. Says the Gemara, no. It was normal in this case for the bird to peck at the rope. Why? Dema'us belisha, it's covered in dough. So it's normal for birds to peck at dough. This rope had dough all over it. Bird's like, fantastic, it's breakfast. He doesn't know that it's a rope. He's a bird. Literally a bird brain, like literally. He doesn't know anything. He sees dough. He's like, fantastic, breakfast, givaldic. He starts eating and he's like, this doesn't taste the same. It tastes kind of grainy. And sure enough, the rope breaks. So therefore, it's still going to be nezek shalem on the rope because the rope was covered in dough, which makes it normal for the bird to do that. Says the Gemara, no, something's wrong with your interpretation. What did we say broke in the brisa? We weren't talking about the rope. Says the Gemara, Baha nishbar hadlik tani. Don't tell me that the bird is chayav nezek shalem, that the owner of the bird is chayav nezek shalem on the rope. Lemaisa, what was the subject of the Mishnah? Was the pitcher. So says the Gemara, you're 100% right, and therefore we cannot use this brisa at all to learn anything for the sake of Rava. Elo, you're right. It's sumchus hi to amar tzroros nezek shalem mishalem. Says the Gemara, must therefore be that this brisa on line 2 of this page, that the tarnagolan that are poking their beaks at the rope and they're chayiv on the breaking of the duli as a nezek shalem, really it's tzroros, but it's tzroros within the camp of Sumchus, who holds that tzroros are nezek shalem. Says the Gemara, that's not so pasha, because Sumchus, if you want to say that we really hold that this brisa is like Sumchus, then the continuation of the brisa will create a challenge for us if we're trying to say it's Sumchus. Why? 6-7 lines down, a Maseifa, what does it say later in this brisa? Nitaz mimenu shever. Let's say that a shard falls from the kli, the nafal al kli acher v'shavro. So let's get the flow of events. Bird pecks at the rope. Everything falls. Pitcher falls. Shard from pitcher number 1 spikes up in the air and lands on something else and breaks it. Okay, says the Gemara. Said the what?
What the chicken itself gets injured.
But that's my chicken. We're dealing with my chiyuvim.
I'd say
my chiyuvim as it
was my chicken, and now you got some goofy hanging structure here. My chicken is something that was normal. Now my chicken is dead. Now I'm coming after you. Take the case a step further.
But it's not. But hold on.
It's your chicken and your rope. The thing then goes and breaks something else. But the second, it seems, because we haven't seen the brisa pasted together, so I'm assuming nothing's missing. But it seems over here that I'm the mazik, I'm the owner of the bird, and my bird eats your rope, the nizak's rope, and when the pitcher falls, it breaks. It's birshus hanizak. So the pitcher falls and breaks. So first part of the brisa was, what is my chiyuv as the owner of that bird, which chewed up your rope, birshus hanizak, and the pitcher broke. The Gemara says chayav nezek shalem, and it's sumchus. It's really tzroros. It's really not regular muad. It's just tzroros. We assume it's tzroros. Then the Gemara says it can't be sumchus because of the seifa. What's the seifa? I'm the owner of the bird. My bird is in your rishus, the rishus of the nizak. It breaks the rope. The pitcher falls. A shard falls and breaks something else. Now, kli number 2 is what we're talking about now. And on this, the brisa says al harishon, like we saw in the ratio of the brisa, mishalim nezek shalom, because it's tzroros according to sumchus. On the first pitcher. Did I say it? I hope I said that on the first pitcher. The al ha'acharon, and the shard from the first pitcher that broke the second pitcher, mishalim chatzi nezek. Now here's the problem. If you want to say that this brisa is sumchus, you can't, because v'i sumchus mi'is lechatzi nezek. Sumchus doesn't hold the chatzi nezek by tzroros. It doesn't matter how many pitchers are involved. You can have a domino effect of pitcher after pitcher in the realms of tzroros, and sumchus will never say chatzi nezek. V'chi tema, and if you want to say that perhaps shiny leila sumchus bein kocho, we're going to take out the word nezek, bein kocho lekoach kocho. So says the Gemara, perhaps really the Mishnah is like Sumchos. The Reisha of the Mishnah is Kocho, and the Seifa of the Mishnah is Koach Kocho, so it's a derivative. Kocho means that the animal was the one that directly broke pitcher number one. Koach Kocho is when the shard from pitcher number one breaks pitcher number two. If you want to try and make that distinction for Sumchos, you can't. Why? Because says the Gemara, a quarter of the way down, Ve'alahad boy Ravashi, Koach Kocho the Sumchos Kikocho. Do we say, according to Sumchos, this exact question was posed by Ravashi? Do we say it's Kikocho Dami or Lav Kikocho Dami? And we didn't give this answer. Tif Shudlei de Lav Kikocho Dami. Says the Gemara, maybe we should infer from here that it's Lav Kikocho Dami, but that's not what Ravashi answered. Therefore, this whole Mishnah cannot be like Sumchos. It's impossible. Sumchos will never hold that there's any chatzi nezek by tzroros. Because that's true, the bryce at the top of this page that we're trying to use for Rava is now potentially available again for Rava. When it was in the realms of Sumchos and chatzi nezek tzroros, we couldn't use for Rava. Now it's not Sumchos anymore. So how do we view this? So the Gemara says a third of the way down on Yud Ches Amud Aleph Elolav, our Mishnah, our Bryce, on line 2, where the chicken pokes at the rope and it falls and breaks a pitcher, that is really Rabbananhi. Ushma mina basar me'ikara azlinan. We follow the me'ikara, we follow the first action, and it's really gufo, and Rava does in fact have an answer. So remember, if we go back to where we started, that Rava had a difficult time trying to understand as to what the status would be in a case of this animal that kicks up a kli. Do we say that the animal really, had he broken it on the spot, it would have pasha been muad, that's normal, it would have been nezek shalim. When he kicks it off, is it considered gufe or is it considered tzroros? Now we have an answer that it's considered gufe. And the Gemara quickly rejects it out of hand and says, no, Amar Bibi bar Abaye, teka'azel mine mine. The animal keeps kicking it, and at some point it breaks. But it's not that he kicked it once and then it broke. That question we don't know the answer to. But because the case we're dealing with in the Brisa is where the animal keeps walking, his front foot keeps kicking the thing further. Sometimes when you're walking with the kids to shul, they find a rock or a stick that they choose to kick forever. They'll kick it for 6 blocks. Nothing. It's annoying. So then the Gemara says over here, that's the case we're dealing with over here. We're not dealing with a regular case. Therefore, me? Save the glory, Dad. Save the glory. This camera has recorded worse about me. I can assure you I've done such misbehaviors. Okay, so that's what the Gemara really doesn't give us an answer. That brings us to the next sugya, which is a complicated sugya, a little bit more than a third of the way down, still Rava. We're going to learn two answers to this, and then get into one more sugya for the rest of the night. We're going to be stopping on the top of Yud Tes Amud Aleph. We'll cover a good amount of ground. Today's Monday. Tomorrow night we're together in person. Wednesday night we're not together, but on time on Zoom. That's fine. And then Thursday, Mir Hashem, we're back in person. So the Gemara now jumps into a connected question. The Gemara says, "Boy Rava." Rava wants to know the answer to the following. Chatzi nezek tzroros. When the owner of an animal is obligated to pay chatzi nezek because his animal kicked up a rock and caused damage, migufo mishalim or me'aliyah mishalim? Does he pay from the basics? He takes that which was damaged and gives it back to the person and says, here are the shards, whatever it's worth, it's worth. O me'aliyah mishalim. Or does the owner of this animal who accidentally broke something have to pay me'aliyah from the best of properties? Now, I just want to highlight that it's a shtickle stira to say that you're paying chatzi nezek me'aliyah. Those two things usually don't go together. Normally we say nezek shalem is min ha'aliyah because you did something really wrong. And chatzi nezek is, we're not sure, remember our discussion is chatzi nezek knas or mama. We're not sure exactly what you did. So usually the punishment is migufo. Here, take what's broken and I'll fill in the gaps for the rest, So they're opposites a little bit to say chatzi nezek gets paid from the best of properties. But that's really what Rav is trying to figure out. Do we say migufo mishalim, that he should pay as he would with a regular case of chatzi nezek, to lo ashkechan chatzi nezek de mishalim me'aliyah, like I just said, that chatzi nezek really has no precedent in halacha to pay from the finest of my properties. Odilmar perhaps would be say me aliyah mishalem delo ashkechan keurche de mishalem migufe, because when something is urche. So that under those circumstances, when something is urche, then we're in a scenario where, because it's urche, by definition, to be migufe. In other words, the Gemara is highlighting a quirk about tsuroros. Tsuroros is where it's the activity that the cow did was normal. Normally, when a cow does a normal damaging activity, you're chayev nezek shalem. But here it was slightly indirect because it was a tsuroros. So which feature do we focus on when it comes to payment? Do we focus on the fact that it was urche, in which case we should pay minho aliyah? Or do we say it's indirect, it's tsuroros, in which case we should be paying migufo? And we're not exactly sure how to answer this question. So 2 attempts. The first one is easier than the second. The first one is a brisa we're seeing now again today. Tashma. We're exactly halfway down in Yud Ches Amud Aleph. Hidus Eino Muad. We saw Machlokes in the Tanoim that the dancing of a bird is not considered to be Muad. V'yesh Omrim Hareisa Muad. And the conflicting opinion says it is Muad. The Gemara questions one of these shitas. Hidus Sal Kedaitach. How can you say that the dancing of a chicken is not Muad? Questioning the first shita in the brisa. Elolav, it must be that Hidus V'hitis, that the animal was dancing and it kicked up a rock. And perhaps this is really the machlokes in this brisa about whether or not a bird is muad when it dances. Man de Amar Eino Muad, according to the Tanakama, who says that when an animal is dancing around, it's not muad. So, kasavar migufo mishalim. What he means when he says that it's not muad is that the payment is as though he's not a muad, that he's a tam, and the punishment for a tam is chatzi nezek, and it would be migufo. Umanda Amar Muad, and the author of the second sheet of the brisa that says that hidus is muad, he holds kasavar me aliyah mishalim. So perhaps, says the Gemara, that we have some precedence here to answer the question of Rav. The Gemara rejects this. Lo, that's not correct. Really, this brisa about hidus, if it's muad or not, is beplugta de sumchos v'rabbanon kemiflage, as to whether or not we say that tsuroros is nezek shalem, which is sumchos, or if tsuroros is chati nezek, as is the shita of the Rabbanon, and therefore this is not helpful to answer Rava's question about whether or not chati nezek tsuroros is paid migufo or me'aliyah. 2/3 of the way down, we get into a sophisticated, lengthy answer, an attempt of an answer to try and answer Rava's question. Toshma, here is a brisa. To be fair, we're not going to see the whole brisa written properly right now. If we were learning in basically any other setting, we would compare and contrast this Gemara to the actual source of this brisa, which is on Daf Chaf Aleph. We don't have time now. We're going to learn it and take it at face value, but it is a complex brisa the way it's presented here. Tashma, the brisa writes, Hakelev shenotal charora. Let's say that a kelev, he sees that there's something sitting on the grill. There's a part of it that's off the grill that he can bite in his teeth. So he picks up the whole thing. V'halach legadish, he goes over to a pile of hay. V'achal hacharara, he eats the food. But what he didn't know, the dog, was that there was a little bit of a coal attached to the back of the pan. V'hidlik es hagadish, and he caused for a fire. He got breakfast, and he also burned down the neighbor's yard. So says the Gemara, al hacharara, for that which he ate, which was urche, which was normal, mishalim nezek shalim pashat. He's a mazik. That's what dogs do. They eat everything. They eat everything. So therefore, if he eats the food that's in the pan, in the Rishus HaNizak, you're going to be chayav nezek shalim. Of course, if I'm the owner of that dog, keep him on a leash. That's my responsibility. However, says the Brisa, Val Hagadish, on the stalk that I burned, that my dog burned, mishalim chatzi nezek. Says the Gemara, that's like tsuroros. Why is that tsuroros? Because I lit the thing on fire. Well, it's true that the dog lit the thing on fire, but he lit one thing on fire, and it led to another, which led to another, and then the whole thing was in flame. As far as the dog is concerned, the normal part was the eating part. The fact that it lit something on fire is considered, it's begeder tsuroros. Says the Gemara explicitly, my taima. Why do we say that when it comes to the burning down of the gadish, that we treat the dog as though his damages are chatzi nezek? The Gemara says it explicitly. Lav mishum dehavya lahu tsuroros. This is a case of tsuroros. The Tani Allah, And on that brisa, we have a beautiful mare makom. There's a typo here. It should not say mishalim chatzi nezek migufo. It should just say mishalem migufo. And now we potentially have an answer for Rava. We wanted to know, is tzroros paid migufo or mialiyah? Here we go. Tzroros is paid migufo. Because when it came to the dog who brought a charara that had a coal attached to it, the second crime, the food is nezek shalim, but the crime of burning down the gadish, the owner of the dog has to pay chati nezek. The Gemara says it's because of tzroros, and the brisa on that Gemara says it's migufo. Beautiful, we have a real answer. Says the Gemara, you can't say that. The Tizbara, is that even logical? And right here I have to interject that the brisa that we saw was missing half. What was missing was the Shita Rebbe Lazar that we're about to see right now. The Tizbara, how can you say that? The Rebbe Lazar, according to Rebbe Lazar, who was missing from the brisa about Kelev Shanot al Charara, Nezek Shalem Migufe Mi Ashkechan. How can you say, according to Rebbe Lazar, who actually holds that there is Nezek Shalem in this case, how can you say that according to Rebbe Lazar, who's in this brisa, that he would ever say Gufe, that would ever be paid migufe? He is a Nezek Shalem guy. It should always be paid minho aliyah. So how does the brisa that says Mishalem migufo shtim with Shitas Rebbe Lazar in the brisa from Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis? Says the Gemara, Ella, it must be kigon deshani behagacheles. It must be that his behavior with the gacheles is abnormal. The Rebbe Lazar savar like Reb Tarfon, and Rebbe Lazar holds like Rabbi Tarfon in regards to another machlokes that we saw earlier in the Masechta, which is the Amar Mishuna Karen bechatzer hanizak nezek shalem mishalem, that he has to pay nezek shalem even in a case of Mishuna Karen bechatzer hanizak. This is a case of a docile animal that does something wrong. Bershus hanizak. Rabbi Tarfon holds stark that this person is chayav nezek shalem, and it has to be minho aliyah. Says the Gemara Velohi, that's not true. Your understanding of Rabbi Lazar is not correct. My time of mukmas law, Kirib Tarfon. Why is it that we just tried and attempted to explain Rabbi Elazar within the camp of Rabbi Tarfon, that when a docile animal causes damage bershus hanizak, that he's chayav nezek shalem? That's mishum nezek shalem. It's because of nezek shalem. If that's true, then it seems like Rabbi Elazar savar kisumchos. That is sumchos. Sumchos holds that tzroros is nezek shalem. The amar tzroros nezek shalem is shalem. The savar lak Rabbi Huda. The amar tzad tamus b'mekoma umedes. This is not for now. This is a lengthier discussion for later in the Masechta. We're going to translate this idea simply right now. There is a tzad tamus. There's a half of the crime that you did that is tam, that really is innocent, and therefore that piece is b'makoma omedes, and therefore b'chiktan migufo atzad tamus. And even when the brisa says, the brisa that correlates to the discussion about the kelev shanot al charara, that brisa is only talking about the tzad tamus, but it's still possible that this brisa is not an answer to Rava, because we're still talking about sumchus, and we're not talking about a regular case of chatzi nezek tzuroros. So therefore, we don't know how Rava would answer this question of whether or not chatzi nezek tzuroros is paid migufo or minho aliyah. Says the Gemara, Omar le Rav Sama b'rei Rav Ashi l'Ravina. Wait 1 second. Eimor deshamas le Rabbi Yehuda v'tam v'nasemuat. When is it that we have this idea from Rabbi Yehuda that half of your payment has tamus, has the docile element to it, and that's why it's migufo? Where do we say that? That's with an animal that starts out docile and changes into being dangerous. That's tam v'nasemuat. But b'muad mitchilaso. But if we're talking about an animal that's muad out of the gate, top of Yud Ches Amud Beis, Misha Masle. There is no such case of applying the rule of Tzad Tamus, that half of the animal's payment is because of the docile nature of that animal. There's no such thing as applying that rule with an animal that's always been muad. Ella, let's try and understand Rebbe Lazar yet again. Ki ka'amar Rebbe Lazar nezek shalem. When does Rebbe Lazar say that there's nezek shalem? Kigon de'iyaid. That is when a person was miyayid in the case of tzroros. An animal creates a habit of damaging through tzroros. That's pretty impressive. that animal knows exactly how to step on something in order for it to either break or to kick off and break something else. Perhaps, says the Gemara, a wild possibility in the machlokas of tsuroros. Let's remember what tsuroros are. An animal steps on a rock, it kicks up and breaks something. Here's the machlokas tanaim. Perhaps really the machlokas is like this. Mar savar yesh ha'ada l'tsuroros. It's possible, ha'ada from the word muad. It's possible that an animal can become muad for tsuroros. He knows what he's doing. He is an evil cow for intentionally stepping on a rock at just the right angle to go off and break your window. Exactly, he's muad. That's the shita of the Tanakama. And Umar Savar, no, what are you talking about? He doesn't know what he's doing. No, ein ha'ada l'tzuroros, even if he does it 100 times, you can't have muad by tzuroros. It's not done intentionally. He doesn't know what he's doing. You want to tell me he's a violent animal? He keeps sticking his horns into other cows? I understand. But this indirect tzuroros move is too sophisticated to create muad. So that's what the Gemara says. And therefore, this actually would work as a possible answer for Rava. Because what it could be is that if tzuroros becomes muad, then it could be migufe. Then it can be mehaliyah. Because now we're talking about nezek shalem. So says the Gemara, maybe not. Elaha debai Rava yesh ha'ada l'tzuroros or ein ha'ada l'tzuroros. If you want to say that that's really what Rava's question was, that we're just trying to determine whether or not tzuroros could possibly enter into the realms of muad. Could you create an intentional habit? Could a cow intentionally do this activity to the point that he becomes muad? Ile Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, they hold categorically ein ha'ada l'tzuroros. Ile Rebbe Lazar yesh ha'ada l'tzuroros. So that can't be, because it's just going to be party lines. It's not going to work out in a normal way. It's not like everyone's going to agree to tzuroros. So how the Mishnah doesn't make that distinction when we talk about tzuroros. So this can't be the answer. So Amar Lach Rava will say as follows. We're on Yud Chesam at Beis, about 6-7 lines down. He'll say, I'm only talking about the Rabbanan who hold of Chati Nezek. Because the pligi alei the Sumchus. What does Sumchus hold? Sumchus holds that Chati Nezek tzuroros is he holds that tzuroros is nezek shalem. So this whole shaila cannot be according to Sumchus, because Rava wanted to know, is Chati nezek tzuroros going to be treated, paid migufo or mihu aliyah? For Sumchus, his question doesn't even exist, Pasha, because Sumchus holds that there's no Chati nezek by tzuroros. Tzuroros is also nezek shalem. Rava's question was only about Chati nezek tzuroros. So the Gemara says it was only according to Sumchus. Aval hacha, in our case, Bein l'Rabbanan, Bein l'Rebbe Lazar, Kisumchas Sfir Lahu, Tamar Tzuros Nezek Shalem Mishalem. So if that's true, v'tayim amay Amur Rabbanan Chati Nezek. Why then does our Mishnah that we're grappling with, this Mishnah which speaks about Chati Nezek Tzuroros, why does it say Chati Nezek? Our case should have been according to both the Rabbanan and Sumchas. Says the Gemara, because the Shani below Yayid, it was an abnormal activity. And there is no such thing as becoming muad with an abnormal activity. And really all we're discussing when we discuss Chati Nezek and Nezek Shalem is simply a question of Rabbi Tarfon and the Rabbanan, and Rava no longer has an answer to his question. Says the Gemara, Amor de Shamas le Reb Tarfon Nezek Shalem. I could understand that according to Rabbi Tarfon that there is Nezek Shalem. That makes sense. At times, Rabbi Tarfon is going to hold that. He holds in general, by damage that's done, Birshus HaNizak, it's Nezek Shalem. But Migufo Mishamasle, that dichotomous possibility of holding on the one hand that it is Nezek Shalem, which typically is paid Minhu Aliyah, and then to say that the payment is not Minhu Aliyah but Migufo, that's talking out of both sides of your mouth. Says the Gemara, a third of the way down, it is possible. Mehecha Maisila, where could this be? Mikeren Birshus HaRabim. We can create a link between the damage that's done by a keren a case of Karen B'Rshus HaNizak and a case of Karen B'Rshus HaRabim. And the Gemara says that we're allowed to make this equation because of the following principle. Dayo lavo min hadin liyos kenidon. We could make a logical extension to make the two things work together very well. And therefore, it is possible for Rabbi Tarfon, who holds that when damage is done B'Rshus HaNizak, that it's nezek shalem, we could even extend that out to the world of Karen B'Rshus HaRabim. Says the Gemara, we have a technical problem with that. And the problem is, V'harib Tarfon lesle dio. He doesn't hold of this principle of dio lavo min hadin liyos kenidon. So says the Gemara, that's not true. The only time Reb Tarfon rejects the idea of dayo to make this extension, so Reb Tarfon can have both nezek shalem and the oddity of the owner paying the nezek, paying minha aliyah, that's only true because of the principle of dayo. But dayo only doesn't apply when it's mafrich kal v'chomer. However, hecha de lo mafrich kal v'chomer, when it's not rejecting a kal v'chomer, isle dayo, that would then work. Does anybody have to daven at the 9:30 mark?
Yes.
Oh, that's a problem. All right, so I'm just going to do a little bit more. We'll do one or two answers and then we'll stop. The Gemara says, Gufa, boy Rava, yeshu adalit tzroros or einhu adalit tzroros. This is a sugya that we started already. Is there such a thing as an animal becoming muad for tzroros? Do we say lekeren midaminan le? Do we say that it's like keren, and keren can turn into a muad, and therefore after 3 times you're done? O Dilma told the deregel, who in which case it cannot become tzroros. Answer number 1, for the 3rd time today. Toshma hidus eino muad v'yeshomrim harei muad. Says the Gemara that perhaps we're in a case scenario like the chicken. According to some, a chicken that dances is not muad. Others say the chicken is muad. Ask the Gemara again, same questions. How can you say that the dancing of the chicken is going to be not muad? It's the way the animal acts. Ella says the Gemara, you're right. It's hidus v'hitis, and it can in fact become muad. Says the Gemara, my love could go into avad plus a zimni. Isn't it possible that it's the case that this animal, this chicken, dances 3 times and creates suros? Perhaps this is what Rav is talking about in his question. We have a fine example. Says the Gemara, lo, it's not possible to say that. Really, what we're talking about is bechad zimna, where the chicken actually kicks up only 1 rock 1 time. We're talking about something else. We're only talking about whether or not tzroros is chatzi nezek or nezek shalim, but we're not talking about whether or not there is such a thing as muad by tzroros. So we don't know the answer. We don't have a way to validate Rava's question. Let's try again. Toshma, 2nd of the wide lines, 3/4 of the way down. Behema hitila glalam leisa. This is gross. Behema goes to the bathroom on chalado, right? And obviously ruins it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Meshalem Nezek Shalem. It's normal for an animal to go to the bathroom, and therefore he's chayav nezek shalem. Rabbi Lazar Omer Chati Nezek. Why does Rabbi Lazar say Chati Nezek? Yes, it's normal for an animal to go to the bathroom, but not on your chalado. That's not normal. Animals are not domesticated, but they still don't go to the bathroom on people's chalado. Says the Gemara, my lab, maybe it's because when we say that he's nezek shalem, that's going to avad tzlas zimne. Perhaps he did so 3 times. And then Rava really does have his question. That an animal can make a habit out of doing these things. And therefore Rava's question is validated. We do have cases where it's possible that you can create muad in tzroros. Says the Gemara, lo, even the case of that animal is bechad zimna, but plugged the sumchas to v'rabbanon k'miflagi. Says the Gemara, why are we even in this case to start with? This isn't a regular case. An animal defecating on your chalado is weird. That case is not normal. Says the Gemara, you're right, but it was the dachik le alma. The world around him didn't give him any choices. I don't know what the logistics are, but the only place he could go to the bathroom was there. Okay, that's your fault. You should do this in the kitchen, not in the barn. Go make your challah somewhere else. Says the Gemara, V'lema Rav Yehuda halcha kisumchus, V'lema Rav Elazar halacha kirabanan. Perhaps we should say that Rav Yehuda, who was of the opinion that it's nezek shalim, holds like sumchus. Rav Elazar says that it's chasi nezek, holds like the rabbanon. Perhaps that's how we should establish the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, no, gelalim yitzrichale. We actually needed to present this case a little differently because salka daita chamina ho lebasa gufa guririn ki gufe dami kamash malan. The Gemara here highlights something fascinating, that when an animal defecates, it's not considered like the gufo of the animal. It's not kocho of the animal. It's kocho de kocho. It's a step removed. Now, not everyone agrees of koach de kocho as we saw in the previous amud, but nevertheless, it is a real possibility. I'm just going to finish up now. If you have to go, you have to go, but it just doesn't make sense to stop here. We have 8 lines left. The Gemara says, Tashma, let's try again to validate Rava's question of whether or not tzroros can become muad. Titani Rami Bar Yecheskel, Tarnagol Shahoshid Rosha La'avir Klis Chuchis. A Tarnagol, this is like out of the cartoons, puts its head inside of a glass jar. The takabo v'shavro, and it breaks the glass jar. The din is mishalim nezik shalim. Says the Gemara from Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says in the name of Amri Bey Rav, in the name of Rav, he says, why is that? Sus shetzanaf, if you have a horse that, what's the word, brays? Nays? Brays? Brays? I don't know. I think bray is the right word. Bray. Thank you. I feel validated. The chamor she noar, and a horse who makes, and a donkey makes. Oh, I didn't see the article. I didn't read the article. I just knew the words were close, and I know that they're both words. So if these animals, a horse or a donkey, do so, what does this say? Mishalem chatzi nezek, different than the brisa. So says the Gemara, my lab, perhaps there's a machlokes going to avat zimni. Perhaps the difference between the Mari Makomo says that in one case it was done 3 times. That's the case of the bird whose head got stuck in the jar, and that's why it's nezek shalom, because the animal's a muad, and therefore we have muad by tziroros. Uvahaka miflage, perhaps mar savar yesha ado, mar savar ein ha'ado. Says Gemara, no, that's not the case. Lo b'chad zimna. Really, it only happened once. But plukta the simchas v'rabbanon kimiflage, and really, there's no raya to Rava's question one way or the other as to whether or not tzroros can ever become muad. The Gemara says, hey, wait 1 second. It's not normal for a bird to stick its head in a jar. Well, that's not urche. That should not be nezek shalom. That should be chatzi nezek out of the gates. Why did you ever say nezek shalom when the bird did that? The Gemara says the Isbei Bazrani, because there were some types of seedlings in there. Rashi says sheish zraim bikli to urche lahachnis rosho besocho v'lechol. It's not normal in general for a chicken to put its head in a jar, but when lunch is in there, it's normal for him to do that. And therefore, even though the pathway to the food was a little abnormal, but because there's food there, the Gemara therefore says that Rava's question seems to not really exist in the Mari Makomos, or at least we don't have an answer to it. We'll stop right here, 4 lines down, Yud Testament Aleph, wishing you all a beautiful night.